Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavivireeditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvigananti Bhuriyajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to the class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on chapter 11. This is with the devotees at Dakshineshwar, part 1, and it's Monday, June 4th, 1883. And we are on page 234. The discussion had been kind of superstitious things. What we would call superstition. That things, the omens and things like that. Sri Ramakrishna, he was a combination of things, but one aspect of his life was that he was a village boy from an Orthodox Brahmin family, and there are a lot of cultural things and customary things that we don't always understand, things that he grew up believing. Anyhow, let's see what he says. So before this, he had said, I shall take this to be true if I meet a certain person or a certain officer of the temple garden, or if a certain officer of the temple garden talks to me. What I would think of would invariably come to pass. So this is what triggers this whole thing. M had studied logic, English logic. In the chapters on fallacies, he had read that only superstitious people believe in the coincidences of morning dreams with actual events. Therefore, he asked the master, was there never any exception? Of course, what happens in his life and what happens in everybody else's life, there are different things. It may be everything true in his case. I know I have many dreams and they're just complete nonsense. And I've even had dreams where so clearly something happened to someone and you think, oh, you make a phone call and no, they're fine, nothing happened. Yeah. Of course, other times people have dreams and they really, something had actually happened, so very hard to say. Master, no, at that time, everything happened that way. I would repeat the name of God and believe that a certain thing would happen and it would invariably come to pass. To Manilal, you'll remember that Manilal was here. He was an elderly member of the Brahmo Samaj. But you must remember, unless one is guileless and broad-minded, one cannot have such faith. Now he's going to make one of these statements that I always feel a little funny about. Bony people, the hollow-eyed, the cross-eyed, people with physical traits like those cannot easily acquire faith. What can a man do if there are evil omens on all sides? This, they don't actually translate this very cute little expression. Dokkeni kolagach, uttare pui, akla karo biral, ki korbo mui. Thakur had so many of these cute little things that he knew that somehow I like to remember some of these things. Literally, it means a banana tree to the south, and then pui, some type of green, so to the north, and then a black cat, a single black cat. So what can I do? Ki korbumi, seeing all these bad signs. So these physical traits, things like that. Thakur, there are two things. One is that he didn't need these physical traits. He could tell what a person was like. He could, like looking into a glass case, he could see the insides. But he did believe in these different things. He would look at, sometimes he would ask someone to remove the shirt to look at the chest. If it was indented chest or this and that. He had his own way of doing things. I asked one of our swamis once about this. And he said, Yeah, we don't really believe in these things, but Thakur believes in it, so we pay respect to these things. Huh? Like this thing about starting a trip on a Thursday afternoon. Huh? Yeah, it's a superstition. We don't really believe in it, but Thakur had great faith in that, so we don't do it. Some of our swamis who are very scientific and rational people and everything, they'll also follow these things. Swami Swananji, he would never start a trip. If he had to take a trip, say they made a flight for him Thursday afternoon, he would leave his room before 12. So he felt like he was starting his journey before 12 o'clock the Thursday afternoon. It is superstitions. He wouldn't travel with a banana. Yeah. I don't know, do you know that? Have you heard that superstition?
Yes.
We had another wonderful Swami, I think I mentioned him last time, Ram Gopal Maharaj. And he stayed with us one time, and we were going for I think we were driving to Thousand Island Park at that time, and we were packing lunch and everything. And I said, can I pack a banana? He said, why not? I said, oh, some people won't travel with the banana. He said, I don't believe in those things. So everyone is different. Everyone is different that way. But
for the exams day,
yeah.
my mother used to refuse us to take the banana.
Oh, just on the exam day? Okay. I don't.
Because that is a bad
Something so banana is a bad omen, huh?
Yeah.
So, Dokkini Kolagach. So to the south, the banana tree. Now, why black cats? Of course, in the West also. A black cat is.
But I myself never seen that happens to anybody.
No.
For many 10 years.
Yeah. It was dusk. The maid servant entered the room. Now another difficult thing to follow. The maid servant entered the room and burned incense. This is Brinde. We meet her the very first day when M comes, because M was asking Brinde, oh, is the master in? Can we go in? The door's closed. Perhaps he's doing his evening devotions. And she says, no, go right in. Then he asked her, has he read many books? And he said, no. That is so mukhe, everything is on his tongue. And so we've been introduced to her, but we don't know much about her, except she was an elderly woman at that time. So it was dusk. The maidservant entered the room and burned incense. Manilal and some other devotees left for Calcutta. M and Rakal were in the room. The master was seated on his small couch, absorbed in meditation on the Divine Mother. There was complete silence. After a time, Bhagavati, her name was Bhagavati, but nickname was Brinde. An old maidservant of the temple proprietor, I'm assuming it's the same person, entered the room and saluted the master from a distance. Sri Ramakrishna bade her sit down. The master had known her for many years. In her younger days, she had lived a rather immoral life, but the master's compassion was great. Soon he began to converse with her. Master, now you are pretty old. Have you been feeding the Vaishnavas and holy men, and thus spending your money in a noble way? She came from the Vaishnava family, of course. Bhagavati, smiling. How can I say that? Amiki kori bolbo? This is a way of saying, yes, I've been doing it. It's kind of a pretended humility or modesty. See, she doesn't want to, she wants to let him know that she's really doing it, but she doesn't want to sound like she's bragging about it. So, ki kori bolbo? Yeah, how can I say that? But yes, I have. Master, have you been to Vrindavan, Benares, and the other holy places? Bhagavati, shrinkingly, how can I say that? But then she starts to brag a little bit. I've built a bathing place, and my name is inscribed there on a slab. Master, indeed. Bhagavati, yes, sir. My name, Srimati Bhagavati Dasi, is written there. Huh? Master, with a smile, how nice. Emboldened by the master's words, Bhagavati approached and saluted him, touching his feet. Like a man stung by a scorpion, Sri Ramakrishna stood up and cried out, Govinda, Govinda. A big jar of Ganges water stood in the corner of the room. He hurried there, panting, and washed with the holy water the spot the maidservant had touched. The devotees in the room were amazed to see this incident. Bhagavati sat as if struck dead. Sri Ramakrishna consoled her and said in a very kindly tone, "You should salute me from a distance." In order to relieve her mind of all embarrassment, the master sang tenderly. Listen to a few songs. Now, some people will say, why did he do that? Does he not know how embarrassed and horrified she'll feel? And does he have no control? Can he put up with a little pain? This and that. There's a natural reaction. Huh? Would Holy Mother act that way? People will say things like that. But Thakur had his own physical sensitivity to things. And everything, I've mentioned this before, but everything manifested in such a concrete and tangible way with him. There's the mind and the body were one. If the mind couldn't bear any impurity, then the body couldn't either. If he said that he couldn't bear to have money, then the physical touch of that money, he said, would sting him like this. There's a type of fish, I think it's like a blowfish or something, or a man of war, Portuguese man of war, something like that. They can sting. It's very, very painful. So was just his nature. This is a part of this mental and physical instrument that he dealt with, and through all of his spiritual experiences, he became so sensitive, and even physically sensitive to impurity. We know that in that state of samadhi, during a certain period, he couldn't bear the touch of anyone, even his direct disciples, except for Baburam. He was the only one. The Swami Premananda. He said, nowadays, I can't bear that when I'm in samadhi, that it'll be painful. And this includes Rakal, Narendra, and everybody else. He says only Baburam was so pure that he was the one, if he went into samadhi, that he would have to be there to hold him up. So this was just his nature. We have to accept this. There's no point in trying to think, oh, couldn't he have done it in other way? Was he so cruel? It wasn't anything that he wanted to do. This is just the way his body and mind worked. He had that tremendous sensitivity to things. Now, he's doing his best, because he knows that how she'll feel mortified by all of this. So the master then sang about the Divine Mother. The black bee of my mind is drawn in sheer delight to the blue lotus flower of Mother Shama's feet. These are all beautiful songs. I remember there's one very nice Swami in Delhi. First time I went there, he passed away. He was from South India, but learned to sing Bengali songs very beautifully. And I heard him sing this song one time. It's just gorgeous. Then he sang, high in the heaven of the mother's feet, my mind was soaring like a kite, when came a gust of sin's rough wind that drove it swiftly toward the earth. These are all Ramprasad and Kamalakanta songs. Again, dwell, O mind, within yourself, enter no other's home. If you but seek there, you will find all you were searching for. God, the true philosopher's stone, who answers every prayer, lies hidden deep within your heart, the richest gem of all. How many pearls and precious stones are scattered all about the outer court that lies before the chamber of your heart. This may not be a Ramprasad song. Does it say? Yeah, it's a little different. Maybe a Vaishnava song even. Okay, that's the end of that day, or the entry for that day. Tuesday, June 5th, 1883. Rakal and Hazra were staying with the master in the temple garden at Dakshineswar. Hazra, of course, he stayed there all of the time. That was where he had his residence. Rakal, he was recently married, but in those days, these marriages were often, they were always arranged, and sometimes they were not exactly child marriage. His wife, I think, was 15 or something like that. I don't know, a little bit young. So it wasn't always that after marriage, the husband and wife lived together. Very often they would wait until the wife was a little bit older. We'll look at the case of Holy Mother. She was 18 when she came to stay with Sri Ramakrishna. And they were joint families on both sides, so sometimes she would stay with her family, sometimes Rakal. And Rakal now, he was married, but he was so drawn to Thakur. And Thakur wanted him to stay with him. Thakur knew he was married, that somehow he knew it wouldn't be a problem for him. We were just reading this morning about Yogin Maharaj, Swami Yogananda, that his mind was not inclined towards studies or to work or anything like that. He was from a young age, very, very spiritual and indrawn in nature. They sent him to live with an uncle and to see if they could engage him in some type of work, do something useful, because the monetary condition of the family wasn't so good. They were a very wealthy, big family at one time. So then the mother said to send him back home. And when he came home, he saw all big arrangements for a big celebration and everything. And then he found out that they'd arranged his marriage without even telling him. And it was 2 days later. And he had no inclination. He said, "No, I won't do it." And then his mother, she started weeping and said, "All the arrangements are made. It'll be such an embarrassment that you have to do this. Otherwise, I may commit suicide, this and that." So finally, he agreed to do it. And later, when his mother saw he wasn't interested in staying with his wife or working or anything, he said, "Well, then why did you marry?" He said, "Why did I marry? You said you would kill yourself if I didn't." He was shocked. And she said, "Nobody marries because the mother says something like that." And then he said, "Nobody but Thakur, but the master could he trust," in his words. But he was so embarrassed that he had gotten married, Thakur always talking about renunciation, that he stopped going to him. Thakur played a trick. I won't go through the whole story. But when he went there, he said, "What is it? You're married. What does it matter? You can be married 1,000 times. It won't hurt or harm you in your spiritual life." So Thakur even sent Rakal back to his wife, "Have a little fun with your wife." And then they had a son. So yeah, we think Thakur was so strict, always this comedy conscience, don't get near women and everything. Each person was a little bit different. So Rakal at this time started staying with the master. His father wasn't happy. Then he said, "Bring your father here." And then after his father met Sri Ramakrishna, and saw that there were other big people there. His father was a little bit of a worldly man. It wasn't so much that he was attracted to Sri Ramakrishna, but he saw that there were other business people and deputy magistrates and all of that going there. And then he thought, "Oh, okay, it's not such a bad thing." So grudgingly he gave his permission, and his wife's family. They were devotees. That's how it was. It was brother-in-law that he first came. So anyhow, Rakal was staying at that time. Hazara was one of the regular people who lived there. M2 had been there since the previous Sunday. So this is Tuesday. So it's a long time. It must have been a school break, school holiday or something. As it was a weekday, there were only a few devotees in the room. Generally, people gathered there in large numbers on Sundays or holidays. It was afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna was telling the devotees about his experiences during his God-intoxicated state. "Oh, what a state I passed through." This is one of the very standard things that Thakur says before he gives his reminiscences. What is it? Ki avastha gache. Ki avastha gache, yeah. So what a state I passed through. So this will be talking about the God-intoxicated state and his behavior, sometimes like a madman and sometimes just a little odd. Because he didn't care what people thought, and like a real eccentric at that time. And you'll see that the things he's going to tell are not very flattering. So just what is the point in telling all of this? The point is one thing, that he has a good sense of humor about himself. The doesn't take himself too seriously, and wants to let them know that in God-intoxicated state, people don't act like normal people do. They have a whole different way of living in the world. At that time, I didn't eat my meals here. I don't know why, in Dakshineshwar, before Holy Mother was there. At that time, he would just take food from prasad, from the temple, Kali temple. I would enter the house of a Brahmin in the village. Dakshineshwar was considered a village at that time, or at Baranagur, or at Aryadaha, nearby places. Generally, it would be past meal time, so he's showing up at the wrong time. This is number one. Anybody who wants to be courteous and doesn't want to put anybody out, if they're going to be a guest. One of the beautiful traditions in India is that if anybody shows up and they haven't been fed, any atiti, any guest, it's the obligation and joy of the householder to feed them. Was it either Holy Mother's mother or Thakur's mother that would wait and wait and wait if nobody came, because they won't take food? She wouldn't take her food till she saw that everyone had been fed. That meant even any guest who had just shown up, any beggars even, or holy men, whatever it was. So that was a tradition, but you try to do it at a time when it's not inconvenient for them. Even for us, sadhus, when we don't go begging our food very much at the time of sannyasa and everything, we know exactly when to do it. Around 10 in the morning, that's when the women are just finishing their cooking and everything. It's convenient and easy for them. We don't want to inconvenience them. So he knew these things. It didn't strike his mind. He didn't bother. He was in half mad state. So generally it would be past meal time. I would just sit down there without saying a word. If the members of the household asked me why I had come, I would simply say, I want something to eat. Now and then I would go, uninvited of course, to Ram Chatterjee's house at Alambazar, or to the Chaudhuris at Dakshineshwar. This will be Swami Yogananda's family, huh? We're guessing that they belong to that Shabarno Chaudhuri family. Yeah, Shabarno. Shabarno Chaudhuri. Yeah. But I didn't relish the food at the Chaudhuri's house. One day I begged Mathur to take me to Devendra Tagore's house. Tagore's house. I said, Devendra chants the name of God and I want to see him. Will you take me there? Now, he was probably at that time one of, if not the most well-known and important figures in Calcutta at that time. He was the, really you can say, founder of the original Brahmo Samaj, Adi Brahmo Samaj. The inspiration really was Ram Mohan Roy. But actually the way we find it today with the name, I would say Devendra. And he was considered to be a very pious person. He was a householder, had a big family. We know about all of the children. Rabindranath, the most famous, of course. But he had a name, Thakur. He always liked to meet people who had some type of good reputation. There's a verse in the Gita which says that if anybody excels in any field, then there's a special manifestation of God within them. So Thakur felt that. A great musician, a great speaker, a great religious leader, something like that. So he would go, he wanted to meet them, he would a little bit test to see what they had. Sometimes he himself would grant them the grace of seeing him and learning from him also. Other times they wouldn't appreciate it. We don't get the full story here, it comes later, but it says, will you take me there? Mathur Babu was a very proud man. How could one expect him to go to another man's house uninvited? He was very, very wealthy, of course through marriage to Rani Rashmani's family. I don't know, maybe on his own also, I don't remember. At first he hesitated, but then he said, all right, Devendra and I were fellow students. I will take you to him. Now, it doesn't tell the whole story, but when he went, he had a long conversation with Devendranath. He was a little bit impressed that he asked him something about his idea about God, and he gave this idea to the chandelier. Just as the chandelier, all the lights of it illumine the chandelier itself, something like that. And Thakur said, oh, a nice idea. And then Devendra said, we're having our Brahmo Samaj festival coming up soon. Will you please come? Of course, he knew that he used to go from time to time. So Thakur said, okay. And then he said a very funny thing. He said, but please dress like a gentleman. It was Thakur, he wouldn't wear a shirt unless it was cold. But otherwise, village people, they didn't do that. He would take the bottom part of his wearing cloth, dhoti, and throw it over his shoulder. You've seen the picture like that. And then, what was his reason? He said, other people may criticize you and it'll hurt me. Not a very, little bit of a funny type of answer. What he really meant was, it'll be a big embarrassment to everybody. So Thakur said, how can I pretend that I'm a gentleman, this and that, I don't know. So he went back and he said the next day a letter came, don't come. Anyhow, Thakur doesn't talk about that here. We get it in a different section. He's just mentioning all of these different incidents. Another day, I learned of a good man named Dino Mukherjee living at Bagh Bazaar near the bridge. He was a devotee. I asked Mathur to take me there. Finding me insistent, he took me to Dino's house in a carriage. It was a small place. The arrival of a rich man in a big carriage embarrassed the inmates. We too were embarrassed. That day, Dino's son was being invested with the sacred thread. So this will be a very important day for the family. That's a very big occasion. This is when the young boy, he'll be initiated into Gayatri Mantra, and they may shave his head and they'll start to keep the shikha and everything, and it's really the day that he, something like bar mitzvah in the Jewish tradition, huh? That he's considered a grown-up person and has responsibilities and duties and everything. So it's a big thing, and they'll invite people over and feed everybody, and yeah. Did you have that, all of that? Yeah. A long time ago, yeah. It happened at different ages and different traditions. Huh?
I had it at 12 years old.
12 years old. Some 9 years old, 11, 12, 13, something like that. Yeah. The house was crowded, and there was hardly any place for Dino to receive us. We were about to enter a side room when someone cried out, "Please don't go into that room. There are ladies there." Now, this was a time when there was this tradition about the inner apartment. Huh? This is, I believe, that this was the influence of Muslim culture, because there the Zanina system was there. It must be an Urdu word, Zanina system, where women had their own private place to stay, and the men don't go there. Now, one of the interesting things is that whenever Thakur visited a devotee's home, they would send him in there so that all of the women devotees could have him all to themselves. And sometimes he would have his meal with them and chat with them and laugh and tell jokes and everything. We think that he was never with women, but it's not true. And they loved him, of course. So this is the inner apartment idea, Zanina system, and the Purda system and all of that. So that was common among the Hindu families as well. So that would have been a great embarrassment if they'd walked into that room with all the ladies there. Who knows if some were still getting dressed or what they were doing. It was really a distressing situation. Returning, Mathur Babu said, "Father," he always called him, Baba, "I shall never listen to you again." I laughed. Oh, what a state I passed through. Once Kumar Singh gave a feast to the sadhus and invited me too. I don't know who this Kumar Singh is. I found a great many holy men assembled there. When I sat down for the meal, several sadhus asked me about myself. At once I felt like leaving them and sitting alone. It's not such a bad thing. Very often, one sadhu will meet another sadhu and they'll ask, what is your sampradaya? What order do you belong to? Even Thakur did that when he met that sadhu near Ram and Surendra's house. He was on his way there and he met him and he asked him that question. And the sadhu said, oh, people call me a Paramahamsa. So it's not such a rude or out of extraordinary type of question. But this was the state that he was in, that he didn't want to hear any of these types of things. At once I felt like leaving them and sitting alone. I wondered why they should bother about all that. The sadhus took their seats. I began to eat before they had started. When sadhus get together, they don't simply do Brahmarpanam. They'll chant all of chapter 15 from the Gita. Sometimes they'll do this Shiva Tandava Stotra. Yeah. If it's a big thing with the sadhus, I got to attend several of these things. It's fantastic. And sometimes they'll do some other things, and the sadhus, even these old sadhus, if they have the stick, danda, they'll hold that and they'll chant this Tandava Stotra. Da-dung, 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 da-dung. It's fantastic. And all this Shiva, the destruction of the universe. It's kind of the national anthem for sadhus. Huh? But nobody will eat before that.
Also, food will be there in the plate.
Well, usually it's not even there, but sometimes on the plate they'll have a little bit. Maybe the rice will be there and they won't serve anything else yet. Or it's a chutney or something. It could be. Otherwise, usually they'll come around with buckets and they serve things that way. The sadhus took their seats. I began to eat before they had started. I heard several of them remark, oh, what sort of man is this? It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the steps of his veranda. Hazara, Rakal, and M were near him. Hazara had the attitude of a Vedantist, I am he. Vedantists generally will find in Thakur's terminology in M, it means an Advaitin. We know there are other schools of Vedanta, but when they talk about Vedanta, generally they mean Advaita Vedanta. I am he. And that means I'm one with the absolute Brahman. Master to Hazara. Yes, all one's confusion comes to an end if one only realizes that it is God who manifests himself as the atheist and the believer, the good and the bad, the real and the unreal, that it is he who is present in waking and in sleep, and that he is beyond all these. Now, M himself wrote that Hazara had the attitude of a Vedantist, I am he. Why did he write that? Because we very often find that Sri Ramakrishna will speak to the attitude of a particular person. So we don't have to necessarily feel that, oh, Thakur really believes this is his final opinion. He's doing this because Hazara is there and he knows that Hazara will appreciate this. So sometimes M will actually say that Amanilal was a Brahmo, therefore Thakur spoke to him this way. Or he was Orthodox Vaishnava, so we spoke to him this way. So that's why he'll talk about this strict Advaita Vedanta here. Now another thing is that it says all one's confusion comes to an end if one only realizes that it is God who manifests himself as the atheist and the believer, the good and the bad, the real and the unreal, that it is he who is present in waking and in sleep, and that he is beyond all these. Now, Thakur used to say that there are 3 different levels, 3 different types of devotees, that the lowest believes that God is somewhere outside, and worships God sitting on a cloud in heaven, something like that. Then the next is to see God dwelling within all the beings. Now, for the Advaitin, this will be the highest. The Dvaitin, that this identification of the jiva with Paramatman. This will be the highest. But Thakur says the highest is seeing that God himself has become all of this. That'll be our Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Now Shankaracharya doesn't give as much emphasis to that, or place as much importance on that idea that all this is verily Brahman itself. More this idea that all of this is transitory and unreal, and that the sole reality is consciousness, Brahman itself. Thakur, he said that this is a higher state, this is a Vijnani state. When he comes down from that state of oneness, then he sees everything's manifestation of the divine. And he'll tell a story which we hear several times throughout the Gospel. There was a farmer to whom an only son was born when he was rather advanced in age. Okay, so this is considered a great blessing. That the whole life they're hoping for a son to carry on the family line. No son, it's old age, that means the family line ends there. It's not a very auspicious thing. As the child grew up, his parents became very fond of him. One day the farmer was out working in the fields when a neighbor told him that his son was dangerously ill, indeed at the point of death. Returning home, he found the boy dead. His wife wept bitterly, but his own eyes remained dry. Sadly, the wife said to her neighbors, "Such a son has passed away, and he hasn't even one tear to shed." After a long while, the farmer said to his wife, "Do you know why I am not crying? Last night I dreamt I had become a king and the father of 7 princes. These princes were beautiful as well as virtuous. They grew in stature and acquired wisdom and knowledge in the various arts. Suddenly I woke up. Now I have been wondering whether I should weep for those 7 children or this one boy." Then Thakur says, to the Jnanis, the waking state is no more real than the dream state. Sometimes he says that the dream state is as real as the waking state. Sometimes the waking state is unreal as the dream state. Anyhow, we get the idea. Now, the reason I mention all of this is that Thakur very often says, I don't like to call this world unreal like a dream. He's not denying that this is a legitimate spiritual attitude. From one point of view, it's true that unreal like a dream means a dream-like, transitory, that at the end, when we leave this world, if we're in some other loka and we look back, it'll appear like a dream, but not 100% literally like a dream. Anyhow, Thakur, that wasn't his attitude, but because Hazra has that attitude, he's telling the story. Also, I think he tells it maybe to Mani Malik at another time, but it'll always be to someone who has that attitude. Thakur did 2 things. One, he liked to encourage people to follow the path that they were on. If they were Jnanis, he would say something to help them. If they were Bhaktas, something for them. But if there was something lacking, or if they were one-sided or a little bit biased one way, then he would point to the other side. He would say, yes, you can follow your path, but understand that other paths are fine too, and that the sectarianism is a bad thing, don't be too bigoted and everything. So he would do both things. God alone is the doer, everything happens by His will. Now this is another teaching that can easily be misunderstood, and this is something that comes when one sees God alone dwells within all beings. And then of course it's true. But this idea that there's a God in heaven who's pushing us around like pieces on a chessboard, this is what we get in this kind of Greek mythology. That we have no say in anything, we shouldn't make any attempt to do anything. If we take it to mean that, then it won't be helpful for us in our spiritual life. We have to feel, and Thakur would say, no, you have to exert yourself. You have to kubrokchai, you have to great determination. So how do we square these 2 things? This is something from a very high point of view. Very often he'll say this is the final word, is when we see that God alone is the doer, everything happens by His will. Hazra. But it is very difficult to understand that. So now he's going to point to the fact that all these horrible things happen, that catastrophes and earthquakes, all sorts of things happen. People, now this pandemic. Do we want to say that it's God's will that these people are dying? Huh? And then what about karma, this and that? Thakur gives different answers at different times. One time somebody was talking about this God's will, and he said, what was his answer? He said, if you eat chilies, won't your tongue burn? So then he's bringing in this idea of karma. Don't blame God for everything, that there's cause and effect is there. So he'll give different answers at different times. Hazra. But it is very difficult to understand that everything is God's will. Take the case of the sadhu of Bhu Kailash. How people tortured him and in a way killed him. They'd found him in samadhi. So trying to bring his mind down. Even Thakur, when he was in samadhi for those 6 months, this one sadhu came and he would have to do something, tap his body, or maybe with a little stick, something to bring body consciousness back so the mind could come down a little bit. So at least he could take some food and swallow it and feed himself that way. So they wanted to bring him down from that state of samadhi. First they buried him, then they put him underwater, then they branded him with a hot iron. I don't know why they did all of this. Doesn't sound like it was just to bring his mind down. They were really torturing him. Thus they brought him back to consciousness of the world. So I guess that was the purpose. But in the end, the sadhu died as a result of these tortures. He undoubtedly suffered at the hands of men, though as you say, he died by the will of God. Now this idea of the will of God, if we accept it, then it's one of these theories that the mere accepting of it allows us to explain everything by it. Just like the karma theory. If we say that, well, this is completely unfair, then we can say that something done in a previous life caused this to happen and it's actually perfectly fair. If we accept it, we can explain it that way. Same thing with the will of God. We can say that we don't understand the reason behind it, that maybe it was for his good, maybe he'll get liberation. We don't know, but it's the will of God. Now Thakur is bringing the karma. The man must reap the fruit of his own karma. So is it the will of God or is it his own karma? Huh? And sometimes we get this idea that this karma theory is the will of God. That the will of God means the plan of God, and the plan of this universe is cause and effect. Huh? These things are very hard to understand. I don't.
How much free will should be there?
How much free will is there? This is a question I don't like very much. This free will. I've spoken about this so many times. I'll just mention one more time. I take this free will as a question of more or less. Not do we have it or don't we have it. And I like the teaching of the Gita that the more we're under the control of our own passions and strong desires and lack that sense of discrimination, the less free will we have. This is psychological free will, psychological determinism, that if we automatically react to something, then we have no free will. The more we're free from the passions, the more we can decide how to react, the more free will we have. So somebody who won't get insulted when you say bad things, somebody who won't get angry, somebody who will always do the right thing, the holy man, the sadhu, not based on the scorpion stinging him or not stinging him, that person has a certain amount of free will. They give this example sometimes of the cow. Huh? Within that circle, tethered to a post, and the length of the rope will describe the circle. Within that circle, he has freedom to roam around, but can't go beyond it. So it's limited. But take the case of, say, an athlete. Huh? An athlete, given the physical body that they have, they can jump a certain distance off the ground. These are basketball players, huh? But through training, they can keep increasing and increasing and increasing. And you'll see these little kids sometimes in playgrounds and stuff with a little step ladder and things, and doing it to learn how to jump higher. And so they all want to learn how to dunk. Huh? So they're not restricted to the physical limitations of the body 100%, but they can jump 10 feet off the ground. They'll never be able to. But little by little, they can gradually increase. So he's saying man must reap the fruit of his own karma. So that means maybe something in the sadhu's life meant for that to happen. But as far as the death of that holy man is concerned, it was brought about by the will of God. Now, how we understand it, I don't know. The Kavirajas prepare Makara Dhwaja in a bottle. This Kaviraj, was a type of medical treatment that goes back to Ayurvedic treatment and all the natural things and not allopathic medicine, and not, what's the other kind? Homeopathic. Yeah, this will be kind of a local thing. Anyhow, it'll explain how it happens. The bottle is covered with clay and heated in a fire. The gold inside, a lot of it is metallic things. The gold inside the bottle melts and combines with the other ingredients, and the medicine is made. Then the physicians break the bottle carefully and take out the medicine. You can't pour it out anymore, it's become solid. When the medicine is made, what difference does it make whether the bottle is preserved or broken? What a nice illustration, huh? So that means that the inside of the sadhu has become gold. He's attained perfection. Doesn't matter what happens to the body at that time. Some people think that the holy man was killed, but perhaps his inner stuff had been made. After the realization of God, what difference does it make whether the body lives or dies? In that state of samadhi, the holy men won't even know, except that this physical pain can bring the mind down even from that nirvikalpa state. This is what happened with Sri Ramakrishna. He himself says, when he was in that 6 months nirvikalpa samadhi, that we get two explanations. One, he heard the voice of the Divine Mother, remained in Bhavamukha. That was one. But alongside of that, he says, at that time, I developed such a horrible blood dysentery, as if ants were crawling all over my whole body. The pain of that brought the mind down a little bit, and I came down from that state of samadhi. So even in that state, just like in the state of deep sleep, you can hit somebody and it'll bring them to the waking state. Huh? So a little bit that to bring the mind down. The sadhu Abhu Kailash was in samadhi. There are many kinds of samadhi. My own experiences tally with the words I heard from a sadhu of Rishikesh. He talked about 5 different types. Sometimes I feel the rising of a spiritual current inside me as though it were the creeping of an ant. So this is all, see, that state of samadhi, we can't say anything about it, but going into samadhi and coming back down from it. Where did we read this? We read this in Vedanta Sara, I think, huh? That the tremendous joy comes from just before going into it, or Raja Yoga, one of them. And then also coming back down from Nirvikalpa Samadhi, tremendous joy. Now, what happens during that Nirvikalpa Samadhi we can't say, but we can infer that there also must be some type of joy, something is happening there, in order for us to be filled with joy when the mind comes down and a little normal consciousness comes to us. So sometimes I feel the rising of the spiritual current inside me as though it were the creeping of an ant. Thakur could really feel this. We talk about the Kundalini as if it's just a theoretical type of thing. But he could actually feel there's something creeping up and going up into the head. He could feel it, but it would do it in different ways. Huh? So this is like an ant. Sometimes it feels like the movement of a monkey jumping from one branch to another. Again, sometimes it feels like a fish swimming in water. Only he who experiences it knows what it is like. There are other types. He doesn't talk about all of them. I think 5. In samadhi, one forgets the world. When the mind comes down a little, I say to the Divine Mother, Mother, please cure me of this. I want to talk to people. Now, we're trying to get to that. He was trying to keep his mind that because he came for a purpose. He had that sense of mission, although he'd never spoken those terms exactly. But if he knew that he came solely for the welfare of others, and that if he remained in that nirvikalpa samadhi state, he was no use to others, then naturally he would have this feeling. When he had that 6-month experience, that there was a Dvaitik sadhana, we read, and he says that during that period, because not many devotees came, it wasn't that he came down from that and then he was free from it. He said most of the time he was in that samadhi state. That people came, he could talk to them, he would eat his meal, and then everyone would leave, and then he would drift back up, like that. So during this later period, the mind stayed down a little more, because people were there all of the time, and that was his prayer to the Divine Mother. Don't make me unconscious in Brahmagyana. I want to enjoy the company of devotees, and also for the sake, this is why they came. None but the Ishvara Kotis can return to the plane of relative consciousness after attaining samadhi. Another big subject, and very confusing to most people. We take this to mean, of course, the highest type of nirvikalpa samadhi, because he makes many other statements, so that we can enter into this state of samadhi, but our karma will pull us down a little bit. Ordinary people. Ordinary people means anybody other than the Ishvara Koti. Ishvara Koti means the avatar and his companions. When we say ordinary people, we're talking about the very highest type of spiritual seeker. Otherwise, ordinary people won't get samadhi. But he uses that term just to indicate that they're not these special adhikarika purushas. So those ordinary people, so-called ordinary people, can attain to that state of samadhi, but there's little karma that will pull the mind back down. So they won't be able to stay in that state too long. The point is, if we enter into that state and it turns into that highest type of nirvikalpa samadhi, there's no mechanism by which we can bring the mind back down. There's no external force like karma or divine will, whatever, so the body will just eventually fall off. Another way of looking at this is that this is the way a God-realized soul leaves this world, in the state of samadhi. This is the way they die, you can say. The body can linger for 21 days, but they're already gone at that point. They're already merged, even while living, already merged in Brahman. Some ordinary men, so this is what I said, they're not ordinary at all. It simply means not the Ishvara Kotis. Attain samadhi through spiritual discipline, but they do not come back. So other times he'll say some will come back because of this karma, or they'll have some desire to work for the welfare of others. These will be our bodhisattva types. But when God himself is born as a man, an incarnation, holding in his hand the key to others' liberation, then for the welfare of humanity, the incarnation returns from samadhi to consciousness of the world. And even then, Thakur felt that it was the Divine Mother. Once M said to Sri Ramakrishna, Thakur had asked him the question, how he could come down from samadhi, this and that, and M said that you keep a little bit of a sense of ego, a little separation, so you can teach others and live in the world. And Thakur corrects him and says, no, the Divine Mother is the one who keeps it in me. And not I can do that. So, M to himself, does the Master hold in his hand the key to man's liberation? These are rhetorical questions. He's not really wondering, he's believing it, but amazed at that fact, that he's sitting in front of a person who can do that. Hazara, the one thing needful is to please God. What does it matter whether an incarnation of God exists or not? This is what Thakur very often says, the incarnation is not for the jnani. The jnanis don't pay too much attention to that. The Brahmos didn't believe in that. It's not such a universally believed thing within Hinduism as we think. The vast majority, of course, accept it. But there were other different schools that either didn't accept it or didn't care much. A lot of the Baals, that everything was a lot of guru worship, Karta Bhaja and other groups. They didn't care too much for the incarnation or gods and goddesses. They liked the worship of the guru, or God dwelling within, mystical ideas. Now, a little bit interesting, because Hazara is always as I am he in the absolute Brahman. Now he's talking about pleasing God. Hazara wasn't always very logical and contradicted himself sometimes. It was the day of the new moon. Gradually night descended, and dense darkness enveloped the trees and the temples. A few lights shone here and there in the temple garden. The black sky was reflected in the waters of the Ganges. The master went to the veranda south of his room. A spiritual mood was the natural state of his mind. The dark night of the new moon, associated with the black complexion of Kali, the Divine Mother, intensified his spiritual exaltation. Yeah, last night, I don't know if anybody saw the beautiful full moon. Huh? Somebody was telling us this is Saraswati, the Purnima, huh? And Snan Jatra. This is during this full moon. This is when it's very auspicious to take a bath in Ganga or Ganga Sagar. Yeah. And they'll also go there. Yeah, and this is when Holy Mother first came to Dakshineshwar, because from her village there was a group going. They were going all the way to bathe, I think, in Ganga, or else just in the Ganges. I don't remember. But so then she told her father, Baba, can I go with them? There's a good chance I'll have companions and everything. And he said, yes, it's time. Anyhow, and that was when she had heard that he had gone crazy, and she thought, if my husband has really gone mad, it's my duty and obligation to be with him and serve him. So that was the time, this Snan Jatra and this Purnima full moon time. Anyhow, this is the new moon. I always wondered why they say new moon. There's no moon. New moon is no moon. Huh? When just before the first sliver will come out the next day. So just darkness. The dark night of the new moon, associated with the black complexion of Kali, the Divine Mother, intensified his spiritual exaltation. Now and then he repeated Om and the name of Kali. He lay down on a mat and whispered to M, Master, yes, God can be seen. X had a vision of God. We don't know who this is. Could be Rakhal, but I'm guessing. Don't know who this is. Why X? What does it say in the Bengali? Oh, it says Omuk. That just means somebody. Yeah, some John Doe. Yeah, not giving the name. But don't tell anybody about it. So this is why he's not doing it. He even if Thakur had told him the name, he's telling don't reveal the name. So he's not doing it here. Tell me, which do you like better, God with form or the formless reality? Thakur very often asks this question. Sir, nowadays I like to think of God without form. When he first got there, he didn't believe in God with form at all, because he assumed it meant idol worship. And now he has a deeper understanding. But I'm also beginning to understand that it is God alone who manifests himself through different forms. So this was, of course, one of the great teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, that either we say God manifests himself in different forms, or that God reveals himself in the form the devotee wants to see, or it's the force of the devotion of the devotee which causes that infinite absolute reality to be seen in a particular way, according to that form. So slightly different ideas. One, that God will reveal himself in a particular form. The other is that we're scooping the water with our own container, and the water will take that form. Or my devotion causes the water to freeze in a block of ice in the form that I want to see. Slightly different ways of understanding it, but the main idea is that even that God with form is still that formless reality. It's the water takes the shape of its container. When it's in a particular container, it has a form but that's not an absolute form. You pour it out, it takes a different form. It doesn't lose its formlessness even when it has form. So God with form, without form, one and the same. Okay, we'll stop here. And I will close. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhathur Vikraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamhidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you, everyone, and have a good week. Stay well.